All right. So maybe we'll just take a deep breath together. And may this podcast be for the highest good for everyone who listens to it. May everyone who needs to hear it, hear it. And may Maureen and I share our love, light, and truth through our experience. So, Maureen, welcome to the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. I'm really excited to have you here today. And I know you have my episode launching, I believe, tomorrow on your podcast, which is called the Broken Open Podcast. So I'm really excited to kind of be in the other seat right now and speaking with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited too, Mike. Thanks for having me on. And I am excited about your episode being released tomorrow on Broken Open. It's great. And I'm excited for people to hear it. So yeah, and here we are again.
Yeah, me too. And when we found each other, I think I maybe reached out to you. I'm not sure. I was really intrigued by the name of your podcast, and it's the same name as your book, Broken Open, A Mother's Journey to Survive Her Children's Addiction and Mental Illness. And the broken open really struck me because that's what happened to me. And I know that's what happened to you. And I want to just kind of dive right in and ask you, can you give us just a quick backstory of the struggle that you faced with having a child with addiction and mental illness, and how that broke you open to find your own healing path and do the work that you're doing today with the world?
Thanks for asking that. So I have 4 children, and 3 of them struggled with mental health and addictions. I now know 4 of them, but at the time, 3 of them were experiencing issues that had them sort of non-functional. And this all sort of started in, I would say, 2011 and continued on. I would say the breaking open for me really started 2013, 2014. And it's been a real process. And I like that you like the name Broken Open. I had a friend that mentioned it to me. I was telling her about what was going on, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you're breaking open." And I thought, "Oh, I am?" And I was, and there's that Leonard Cohen song Anthem. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And I thought of that often over the years because I describe myself as a bit of a slow learner. Some of us can take a hint. Some of us need to be, hit over the head a few times. And I'm the latter.
I'm with you.
I needed to run into a brick wall over and over and over again to kind of get, okay, this way that I've learned of being isn't working for me anymore. And as terrifying as the prospect is, I need to let go of it and open up to a new way of being. And I don't think I would have done that work had I not had to, because it was terrifying. Honestly, I felt like I was being swallowed up. Actually, I thought I was losing myself completely, and my fear was that I would become someone I didn't know, recognize, or maybe even like or respect very much. I grew up in a home in which being strong was admired, fighting was okay, anger was great, being weak was not okay. Being and that goes along with sad, pain, all of that sort of those emotions were not ever allowed in my house, and quite, mocked, ridiculed, looked down upon. And so when I thought about letting go of control, which is how I approached, my parenting, I'm going to manage this problem. My kids are struggling. They need me to take over, and I'm going to walk them through it and get them where they need to go. And it wasn't working. 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 And I was exhausted from the effort, becoming quite resentful of my life. I'd been dealt a raw hand, I thought. How could I have, and I remember saying this to my husband at the time, we love each other. We love our kids. There's no overt abuse or big T trauma in our home. I didn't word it like that, but there's no abuse and trauma in our home. And we're educated, we're smart, we've got money, opportunities, the kids have got everything they need. How are we screwing this up so badly that we've got 3 kids, 2 of whom are, in, addiction, one's experiencing psychosis, 2 kids being diagnosed with borderline personality, one of them self-harming, multiple suicide attempts over the years. And I remember saying to him, stupid people raise kids and launch them effectively. What is going on with us? Like, why can't we get this right? And so that's sort of where we were at. Like, I mean, my identity was pretty wrapped up in my ability to help other people, always had been. And that's the codependence piece, right? Like, really, I didn't know who I was if I couldn't help the people around me. What was the point? Like, as a nurse.
Yeah, you had caretaker written all over you.
Oh, cape and boots on the ready,
Yeah,
right? Like,
me too.
yeah, I'll save you, whether you want to be saved or not. I'll save you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't effective, and I was losing myself. I was becoming someone I didn't like, someone I didn't recognize, and ironically, my fear of letting go of all that was that I become someone I didn't like and didn't recognize, and yet I was already there. And so that was my story of breaking open. I had to learn a new way.
Yeah. And for the listeners, Maureen isn't in recovery from substance abuse herself, correct?
That's right.
But her children were struggling. And normally, we have people that speak from experience of addiction, but Maureens Work is really supporting the parents of people who struggle with their children in addiction and mental illness. And I know she's bearing off into some other areas in her work too. We can talk about that in a little bit, but I think what's really beautiful is you can probably flip it around to say there's a lot of people who are listening who are struggling with addiction, and their parents are alcoholics as well. And that codependency, that lack of boundaries, that chaos is there too. So whichever lens you want to see, from, it's all good. And right now, I think this is a great episode because it gives the parents a chance to really kind of hear what they need to hear from a mother that's been through this. And wow, I didn't know you had 4 children, and that's a lot. And I've been in this road too with a family member, trying to save them, trying to take care of them, and it's really, really challenging. So let me ask you, what is the main problem that parents with addicted children have and they're suffering from when they come to see you and work with you? What's like the commonality?
They're isolated. They're hopeless. And they are living a life that they would have told you probably 5-10 years ago that they would not tolerate. They're walking on eggshells in their own home, and their behaviors are motivated by fear, and they have trouble identifying what that fear really is.
And what would you say that fear is for most of them?
The fear is that my child's not going to be okay, and therefore I'm not going to be okay.
So more or less, what I'm hearing is that the parents' fear of the child dying or getting hurt or whatever is so prevalent that it supersedes any, like, not common sense, but way of being that really supports their health and welfare first.
Yes, absolutely. And so because they're so afraid of losing their child and ultimately not surviving it themselves, they will lower the bar and lower the bar and lower the bar, and fear enforcing a consequence. Like I say, years ago, probably would have said, well, I would never put up with that. But the fear of not putting up with that is that their child is going to be homeless, on the streets, die alone, overdose somewhere, become the victim of, predators on the street, all of the things that are horrible to think about. But that's what keeps parents stuck.
Do you think that fear is conscious or unconscious?
It's I think it's below the surface a lot of the times. I know that for me, I could rationalize my behaviors. This is what's good for them. But really what it was is, this is what's, I think is going to prevent the pain that I fear could be coming. But I don't think it's a conscious thought. And in fact, when I ask parents, what's your worst fear? We have to keep asking, and then what will happen? And then what will happen? And then what does that mean about you? Dig and dig and dig until they get down to the fear that they can feel it. Like when they say, I'm afraid this is going to happen, and they feel like they're going to vomit when they say it.
Yeah, like the
That's the real,
visceral feeling.
that's the fear.
Yeah.
But I mean, I started out with the fear that my kids were going to live in my basement forever. That's the first fear I had. My kid's never going to get a job and be a functional adult, and they're going to live in my basement forever, and that's going to be hard for me. That was what I thought my fear was, but that wasn't my fear. It went way deeper, and it ultimately it was, my kids are going to die, and I'm not going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I joke about codependent parenting. You can always spot a codependent parent because you say, how are you doing? And they'll tell you how their kids are doing. A codependent mother is only as well as her sickest kid.
Yeah.
And
wow,
that is the trouble with it, right?
Yeah. And this is powerful. Going back to what you just said about the parents projecting that fear about their children not being okay, so they have to save them and go through the ringer doing it. I had that same fear with my mom, and I never knew that was the deep lurking fear for decades.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the fear that lived in my gut that caused a lot of IBD, irritable bowel disease. And when I began to notice that this little guy inside of me was petrified of losing his mom. Now, if we flip it around, you're a parent that's petrified of feeling the feelings potentially that may happen when that day comes that something really tragic happens to your kid. So, what I've found, and once again, this, like you said, it's below the surface, and it's so important and worth talking about, because when you can begin to create mindfulness around that deep projection in the sensation and bring in some self-regulation, and it's a total game changer. So if that makes sense to you, awesome. But how do you begin to work with that really deep, let's just say below the surface fear and the visceral sensation, or helping them get to the visceral sensation so they can be liberated from that?
Yeah. Well, I don't do somatic work so much, Mike. But I use it to tell me when I'm on track.
But you ask good questions.
Yeah. So when they feel like they're the nausea, when they identify the fear, that's how I know we've got it, right? Because they can feel it. And what I call it out. I had, when I've got a client that says, well, I'm afraid, I'm letting my child live in my basement suite and destroy my home and, become malnourished and dehydrated to the point where I have to, help them out of the home to get to the hospital to rehydrate every 2 months. They're not working. And then I say, so, what are the consequences of them, let's say, not paying their rent? Well, then they have to move up here with me. Okay, so now you're being tortured in addition to them, living a tortured life. How is that a consequence? Like, how is that an effective, and this person would say something like, and I'm using, this is an amalgamation of people that I'm talking about, but I'll say, so like, well, what's holding you back from saying to this adult child of yours, like you would to anybody else, that if you don't pay your rent, you need to move out? Well, I couldn't have that because then they would be homeless and I don't want them to overdose somewhere. And then I'll say, well, I'm going to be kind of frank here. your child could overdose in your basement. Or they could go into recovery. Let's talk best case scenario. They go into recovery, recover wholly. You have the relationship of your dreams with them. They leave the house tomorrow to get milk. They cross the road and they get by a car. Like, let's just call it out that your efforts to control the outcome are a fairy tale. It doesn't work. You can't control anything. And so the only thing that you can control, is what you are doing, and how you're managing what's healthy for you and what you're role modeling for your kid. Let's get into that kind of material. And so, that's the kind of work I do with fear, is just let's talk about and all these fear-based decisions that you've made. How's that going for you? How's it working out? Because it's led you to this point. It got you here. It's not going so well, and nothing changes until something changes, and all those kinds of things. And some real examination of your child has a life to live that isn't yours to manage. They have a journey to take. They have trials and tribulations, and they get to own those. Stop sending them the message that they can't handle their own life. They can, and you get to handle yours. And I want to go back to something that you said earlier quickly, because you mentioned that a lot of your listeners are in recovery. And I have yet to meet someone in recovery who isn't codependent.
Mm-hmm.
Codependence was my addiction. My addiction was controlling and managing other people, in an effort to be okay. I was looking outside of myself for a solution to pain that I had inside too. It was just it was a behavioral addiction. So there you go.
Yeah, and it all kind of intertwines with one another. And I often find that the codependency can actually be hurting the person more. And if we could only just begin to let go, and this is a journey literally that I am learning right now in real life. So I am in the territory of exploring this in the reverse order.
Yeah.
I've been the parentified child. If you look in the Webster's dictionary and you look up parentified child, you'll see my face. So, and I think, I think, giving up that control, part of it is, my world's going to crumble, or, I can't save my mom. And what do you have to say about hurting the other person with the codependency?
Yeah, I think the message is really clear. When we rescue, save, the person who's being rescued and saved, the message that they are getting, whether you intend to send it or not, is that you need me to live a life. You need me to solve your problems because you can't do it yourself. You're ineffective. And that, if you look at, I'm a fan of the drama triangle. I don't know if you know that one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a rescuer, a victim, and a persecutor on there. And we create victims when we perpetually rescue others. And
wow, that's pretty powerful. We create victims when we rescue others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I never really thought about that. Yeah, that's deep.
And I remember thinking, I need to let my kids own their victories as well as their failures or mistakes. They need to feel the consequences of both. They need to, and I, as much as my ego wants to, like the cape and boots, I want that speech from the podium. I want to thank my mom, and
for saving me.
Yeah, my higher power, my mother, for saving me over and over. I just don't think that's very fair. I think back on all the things that I've gone through, the trials, the tribulations, the breaking open, the things that have taught me who I am and what I'm made of and what I'm capable of. And those were the things that I was allowed to go through and and ask for help if I wanted it, ask for help if I needed it. But I got to own, the victory over those issues or the journey through them. And I would be so resentful today if someone had robbed me of that by saving me over and over and over again. I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't know what I'm made of, really. I wouldn't have discovered the things I discovered about myself. And so who am I to rob my kids of that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a powerful point. And it leads me to a different vein here that I want to go down with you. Going back to your story in particular is looking back at your own situation with having struggled with children who are addicted. Would you say that has been a necessary part of your own personal growth and transformation journey?
Oh yeah. I honestly, I credit the kids with saving me, honestly, because I think I would be such an unhappy, I would lack the awareness that I have. I wouldn't, you can only feel joy in the proportion that you're willing to feel pain. And I was so running from the pain all the time and being in action and managing and looking outside of myself, like I said, for solutions to my problems. And
Mhm.
I really do appreciate the journey that I went on with my kids and their patience, honestly, while I learned what I needed to learn, which is how to parent them as to be their mom and quit being their caregiver and their case manager, and just learn how to cheer them on and say, let them know that they're not alone. I've been there. I felt those feelings before too. That sucks. And, it's hard for me to see you hurting, but I believe in you. I know you got this. I know that when you're ready for something different, you'll do something different. You'll get the help there's help out there for you, and you'll find it. And I'm more than happy to help you find it if you want, but I'm not it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's the boundary.
Yeah.
So going back in the beginning, you said they saved me. And I thought this to myself, by you no longer saving them, they saved you.
Yeah, they did. They did. But it was such a hard thing. I remember I was telling this story the other day about when I put them into a treatment center. It was a family treatment center. Thank goodness for this treatment center, because we had to go to meetings as parents and do group therapy as parents, or they wouldn't keep our kids. So that was the only reason I went. Okay, I'll do whatever you need to do so that you save my kids. So I show up in this group meeting, and I remember, I've got these kids. I'm at the point where I don't even want them back. Like, I'm so done with these two boys. Like, they're killing me. These kids are killing me, and I don't deserve this. And I've got a life to live, and I've got bigger things to do, and just take them and fix them and launch them and don't send them back to me. I don't want to live with them anymore. And yet, a week into treatment, when I don't have access to them anymore, I'm driving by the treatment center, at 70 kilometers an hour, and I don't know, 50 miles an hour, let's say. And then, and I'm peeking over the cement median to see if I can see any sign of them at the treatment center. And I get telling this story in the parent meeting, thinking that I'm telling them what a good parent I am. Look how much I love my kids. I'm worried about them. And I remember the person running the meeting looked at me and said, "Man, you need to get a life." And I was just like, what do you mean I need to get a life? First of all, I don't know what that means. Like, what is a life outside of worrying about my kids? Them. And you're missing the point. I'm a good mother. That's why I'm driving by 70 kilometers an hour. But it's sunk in, it was like, holy crow, you're right. I finally have the opportunity to get on with it here. And I don't know how. That's startling. I don't even know where to start. So that was the beginning, I think, of my learning to do my own work. And I'm pretty big with the parents that I work with, that you are role modeling every day, and your kids will follow your example. So if you're role modeling, looking outside of yourself for a solution to your problems, your kids will learn to do that. If you, by chance, can switch that around and role model doing the work that you need to do to be healthy and happy and whole, there's a better chance your kids will follow that example and do
Yeah.
that too.
Beautiful. And what I'm realizing in my own journey is in not trying to save my mother, I'm actually healing that scared little boy that was in there his whole life, who struggled with that issue of mom being an alcoholic. I'm really now tending to him, his fear, his worry, his concern, while trying not to be the savior and exiting like slowly backwards.
Yeah.
And it's challenging, but I really commend you for being willing to turn it in on yourself,
Yeah.
rather than continue to lose yourself in your kid's situation.
Yeah, that's amazing, Mike. There's so many of us that learn to parent our parents, and there's no freedom in that. It's not your job to save your mother, and your job is to learn how to receive her love in the way that she offers it, even though it might not be the way that you want it. And we've got to, you've got to change that relationship back to the way it was meant to be, which is she's the mom and you're the son, and your job is just to receive her love and give it back, but not to parent. And it
Oh
screws
yeah.
the whole system up when we
The
parent.
whole it's completely flip-flopped. And in the context of me, and going back to as a parent with um addicted children, I know the role is still there, but the role has you're out of your lane, I
Yeah.
think.
Yep.
So going back to, we talked a little bit about boundaries. What is the difference between setting a boundary and creating a rule?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you share about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question too, because I think I was so mixed up at first. I thought early on when I was, saying things like to my kids, you need to go to AA meetings in order to live here. Or if you don't go to AA meetings, you can't live here. Really, my goal there was to get them to go to AA meetings. And that's a rule, right? A rule is something that you put in place to influence another person's behavior. I want your behavior to change, so I'm going to put a rule in place to make you behave a certain way. And a boundary is really about me. Like if I'm creating a boundary, that's something that I need to have in place to be healthy, so that I can love you as much as I love me.
So what made that look like for you, for a person, for a parent, setting a boundary within themselves? Because so many people in dysfunctional family systems, boundaries are like a foreign word.
Yeah. Well, they can look, the outcome might be exactly the same, but what drives it is quite different. And that's what I'm asking people to check in with. So for example, let's use the example I used about a rule. So if you don't go to AA meetings, you need to move out. Okay, that's a rule. Let's go to the way I would coach someone around a boundary there is, let's not talk about their behavior so much as what you need. What do you need in your home? And people will say, well, I need, peace. I need it to be a refuge. I need I need to, it needs to be tidy. Common shared space needs to be tidy and clean. Needs to be quiet after 10 p.m. No going in and out all night. Okay, so let's talk about that. So then now, instead of saying, if you don't do these things, you got to go, you say, in order to stay in this home, in which I need to be this, you need to help create that. That's my boundary. That's my boundary around my living environment, the home that I own, pay for, live in. If you want to live here with me, this is what needs to be in place, because it needs to be a healthy refuge for me to come to. Now, if you choose not to do that, you are choosing to move out. I am not kicking you out because you wouldn't follow a rule. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it might end up being the same thing. The kid might end up going to AA or whatever they need to do. I'm not bothering with all that. What I need is, I'm looking around me to say, okay, are things in my environment the way they need to be so that I can be my best self, grounded, I sleep well, I eat well, so that I can be fully present and loving in the relationships that matter to me.
Mm. And I think at least when I ask some clients, what do you need? Sometimes you get like the million-mile stare for like 2-3 minutes, and it's interesting, and it's beautiful at the same time, because we're discovering that we don't even know what we need sometimes.
We don't. It's much easier to start with what we don't want, right? And so and that's okay. If people need to start with a list of what you don't want or what you can't have in your life, start there, and then we'll flip it over to what you need to have in place to be healthy.
All right, so let's take a scenario of a parent with a child or children who are addicted, and they're struggling. Give me like the first 2 or 3 steps that they can do, whether it's boundaries, whether it's ask yourself what you need, whatever it is. What can they begin to do right off the bat? Go to a meeting? I don't know. What do you suggest?
It's everything's so connected. I think one of the first things I encourage people to do is to do that. Think about what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do? And what does freedom mean for you? Because they all want freedom, right? They all want a healthy relationship. What does that actually mean for you? Because it might be different than what it means for me. And of course, what you're willing to do is going to be different. And it can change. I give them permission to change it. Because what you're willing to do this week, whatever you need to do to sleep at night is okay.
Yeah, and I think the more solidified you become in yourself with those boundaries, the more the less shit you're willing to put up with.
Yeah, and the more you believe that other people really can, and it really is up to them. They are the only ones that can seek recovery if they want it. You can't, there's nothing that you can do to make them get well. There's nothing you can do to make other people get well. There just isn't. We're just not that powerful. We really aren't. We can role model getting well, and we can look after ourselves, but we can't make other people. We can, however, work on the relationship with those people so that if and when they choose something different, they know that we are a safe place to come to get assistance with that if they need it. So like I say, and that doesn't mean I'm going to counsel my kids. That means that I will help them. It's safe to call me up and say, Mom, I'm spiraling out of control. I don't want this and I don't know what to do. And my first question is going to be, well, first I'm going to validate it, right? Start with validation. Holy shit, that sounds scary. You sound sad. You sound like you're in a lot of pain. And yes. And then what are you willing to do about it is my next question. Because if the answer is nothing, and sometimes it is nothing, then okay, Matt, hurts to see you hurting. And I'm here when and if you change your mind on that, because there's some respect there, right? It's like, you don't have to want to change. You're allowed to tell me that you're hurting and that you're not done using meth.
Yeah.
Like that's okay. It's actually okay with me. And then I get to choose how close I get to be to that. Like, how close can I be and still stay well? The healthier I get, the closer I can be. It's amazing.
The healthier you get, the closer you can be.
Yeah, it used to be that I needed quite a bit of distance from my kids when they were using in order to be well, because I had trouble separating it, turning off the tap there with the pain. But I'm pretty healthy at this point, and my kids are high. I'm actually, as long as they're behaving okay, I'm all right. It's like I love them. I want to spend time with them and be in relationship with them, and I'm not as distracted by my fears,
Yeah, trying to control it all.
Yeah, checking their pupils and like I just don't anymore. It's like, you're going to do what you're going to do. Yeah. And I love you and I'm your mom and I like hanging out with you. But if it's uncomfortable and it's weird and you're acting really strange and it's distracting, I'm out. I'm going to go home now. I need to go look after myself. Talk to you later. It's okay.
What did you do to sleep at night? You know, there's parents that are struggling, saying, I cannot sleep at night with my kid in active addiction. What did you do to sleep?
Well, there's a lot of sleepless nights. I think one of the things I remember, one of my kids' relapses, they live downtown when they're in relapse and they're homeless. They're down, not far from where I live actually. And I would lay in bed and think, oh my gosh, I'm just like, oh, praying like, please, please look after them and please make sure they're okay. And, please, help. I would just agonize over the pain that I was projecting onto them. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute. When they're using, they're not feeling any pain. Like they're feeling great right now. When they're using, I'm in pain. When they're not using, they're in pain. Okay. So that actually helped me a little bit. It was like, okay, they're actually feeling okay right now. And they're way more resourceful than I am. And I have to trust, I have to have some faith that I don't get to understand their journey. I don't get to know the reasons why this is happening right now, but it's for the greater good of all concerned. And that things are going to play out exactly the way they're meant to. It was the faith in that helped me to sleep at night. And it wasn't I didn't get that overnight. It came from example after example after example of, even though I'm not managing everything in my surroundings, they all seem to come out well. In fact, they come out better than I would have planned it. And I think about that now, my kids are so much more fun and funny and intelligent and interesting today than they probably would be if I had my way. If I'd had my way.
Yeah, there's you getting out of the way, which is beautiful.
Yeah, the less I interfere, the better things seem to go. I'm happier, they're happier, our relationship's better. And doesn't mean I don't have pain. It doesn't mean I don't have fear. Those things do come, and I own them, and I'll talk to my kids about them. I'll say, I'm finding this difficult, and I own that. Don't you worry about it. I'm just letting you know what's going on for me in the interest of being honest, and I'll handle it. I'll do what I need to do. It's okay, So I don't ever want them to feel the burden of my feelings.
Yeah, and I think what's really coming through for me for this is like you're building so much resilience and just really transforming this pain into an opportunity. And that's why when we connected, I vibed with you like right off the bat. And I just really appreciated that you were willing to surrender to your own pain, to be broken open through these kids, to actually evolve. I mean, if your children didn't go through their struggle, like mom wouldn't have this much wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think at least what I take from this chat today is if you're a parent with a child who's struggling, and for me, because I'm on the flip side, I have an alcoholic parent who's in sobriety, but still working out a lot of stuff, that this is really an opportunity to awaken. And that's the work I teach through addiction and illness is pain as opportunity to awaken consciousness. And you've done a beautiful job at, blooming your lotus from the mud.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I agree with you that it really is an opportunity. And, like I say, if I hadn't experienced this with my kids, I think that I would be a very still, controlling, unhappy, emotionally stunted person who couldn't feel joy, contentment, The relationship with my kids would be strained, even though they would be doing well, quote unquote, well, probably. It would still be strained because I would be still trying to tell them what to do, manage their life. My oldest son's quite cheeky. He every now and again will say, yeah, thanks, Mom. Thanks for trying to manage my life for me. That's his that's his
His line
response
for you.
to my unsolicited advice. And okay, I hear you. You're right. I'm off. I get it. And because the tendency is still there, I still have a lot of opinions, and uh, the kids know it. So, but I try and keep them to myself. I don't need to weigh in on everything. I just really don't. They're going to be fine. They're fine. They're figuring it out. They're living their life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's as we wind down here a little bit, let's just talk about your book. I know your book Broken Open came out in this year, right? 2021.
Yep. January.
Yeah, tell the audience a little bit about your book and the work that you do with people, how you support them, and how they can find you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for that. Yeah. So I finally published the book, my goodness, in January. And the book is part memoir, part self-help. And so what I've done is, on the backdrop of my journey with my kids, I ask questions and make recommendations or bullet points for parents or the reader on what they can do, what they can learn, what I learned from the experience, and what they can then implement. Don't make the same mistakes I made, first of all, hopefully. And I made every mistake you can make, like everything you could do that could go sideways. We did that, and did some really smart things as well. And so the book is a tool really for parents who are struggling. It's a book I wish I'd had, when we started on this path, and I felt very alone, and shamed and frightened and all the things. And so it's and I have permission from my kids, by the way, to share everything that I share. And they've even written a bit in the book. So at the end of the book, they've each written their own what they want the reader to know. And that's my favorite part of the book, actually. And so, yeah, it's really how I learned what I learned, and why I teach what I teach, and why I coach what I coach with other families. And so I work with families who are experiencing serious difficulties with a loved one who's no longer functional, and their relationship is quite strained. They have to be quite far along on that journey. They have to have tried a whole bunch of things by the time they're my client, and be quite stuck, and so I help them walk through the crises. So teach them some tools how to manage a crisis, because they aren't one-offs. They just keep coming up. So here's let's talk about how you work through each one of these. And I give them some really concrete skills and tips to use in crisis. And then the way that my work is evolving, which you alluded to earlier, is that if people want to understand and dig into the pattern that they developed that is no longer working for them. I mentioned earlier that was my situation, and it's really common. We come by our patterns quite honestly in our families of origin, and they work really well until they don't work anymore, and then we have a hard time letting them go and changing them. And so I will help people dig into that pattern so that they can, knowledge is not enough for behavior change. There's a whole letting go and trust piece that goes with it. And so I'll help people with that and family trauma stuff. And yeah, so
Beautiful.
Yeah, and people can find me on my website, MaureenTowns.com, and the book links are there as well.
And you have the podcast. What's the podcast is Broken Open as well, correct?
The podcast is called Broken Open as well. And it's on the website as well. And it's also on whatever platform people listen to. It's on like 8 or 9 platforms out there. So you should be able to find it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being on the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast, Maureen. I'm really grateful for you and your work. And I'm so once again amazed that you've turned this story around, really, and it's beautiful to hear that your kids even put a little insert in the book. So that's precious.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
You're welcome.